Jason sat at the kitchen table, his fingers trembling as he stared at the letter in front of him. The official-looking envelope, marked with the university's seal, had arrived that morning. He had dreamed about this moment for years, the moment he would get a scholarship to the college of his dreams, the place where he could finally escape the confines of his small, run-down neighborhood. The moment his future would no longer be decided by his zip code or the color of his skin. And now, here he was, holding the golden ticket. The scholarship. The acceptance letter. But something was wrong. There was a sharp pang in his stomach as his eyes scanned the first few lines of the letter. The familiar words seemed to blur. The congratulatory message, the excitement he had anticipated for so long, felt empty, hollow, as if the weight of the world was pressing down on him. Jason Blackwell, we regret to inform you that your exam results have been flagged due to suspicious discrepancies. A full review of your performance will be conducted immediately, and as of now, your scholarship is suspended pending investigation. The words were like a slap in the face. Jason felt his heart race, his palms grow slick with sweat. He read it again, hoping that maybe this time it wouldn't be true. But there they were, in black and white, the accusation. Suspicious discrepancies. His stomach churned. He had worked harder than anyone. He had done everything right. He had studied tirelessly for the entrance exams, stayed up late poring over books, memorizing every formula, every piece of information that could help him. His friends, Sarah and Malik, had done their best to keep him grounded, reminding him that his talent would carry him through. They were proud of him. He was proud of himself. And now, just like that, it was all slipping away. Jason looked up at the clock on the wall. It was just after noon. His mother, Lisa, was supposed to be home soon, and he had no idea how he was going to explain this to her. How could he tell her that after everything they had been through, the late nights, the sacrifices, the struggles, he might lose everything because of something he didn't even do? His mother had worked 2 jobs ever since his father walked out when he was just a little boy. She had poured everything into raising him, giving him every opportunity she could, pushing him to succeed, to be better than what the world expected of him. She had always told him that hard work would pay off, that if he did everything right, things would fall into place. But now, it felt like the world was telling him that being black, being poor, no matter how hard you worked, wasn't enough. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Jason closed his eyes, trying to push the anxiety back down. He didn't want to cry. Not now. Not when there was so much at stake. But the reality of the situation hit him hard. He was being accused of cheating. Of doing something he would never do, something that went against everything his mother had taught him about integrity and hard work. How could they think I'd cheat, he muttered under his breath. He felt a bitter laugh rise in his throat. Maybe he wasn't surprised after all. He had always known that success, especially for someone like him, wouldn't come easily. That people would look at him and question his abilities. His grades had been too good, his achievements too perfect. Maybe they thought it was impossible for someone like him, a young black kid from the wrong side of the tracks, to earn everything he had. It didn't matter that he had earned every single point on that exam. The suspicion alone was enough to tear down everything he had worked for. The knock on the door broke his thoughts. Jason quickly wiped his eyes, standing up to face his mother, who had just come home from her shift at the diner. "Hey, baby. How's your day going?" Lisa smiled as she entered the kitchen, her eyes soft with exhaustion. Jason opened his mouth to speak, but the words stuck in his throat. His mother's tired smile faded as she looked at the letter in his hand, her brow furrowing. "What is it, Jason?" she asked, her voice steady, but her concern growing as she stepped closer. He handed her the letter, watching her eyes scan the page. The color drained from her face as she read the words. "Suspicious discrepancies," she whispered. Her voice shook as she looked up at him, trying to make sense of what she was reading. Jason, you've worked so hard for this. You did everything right. There's no way this is true. Jason swallowed hard, his own voice barely a whisper. I don't know, Mom. I don't know what happened. I did everything they asked me to do. I studied. I didn't cheat. His mother took a deep breath, folding the letter carefully and placing it on the counter. She pulled him into an embrace, her hands rubbing his back as if trying to reassure both of them. But Jason could feel the tension in her shoulders, the way her body stiffened under the weight of the accusation. We're going to fix this, she said firmly, her voice full of determination. I don't know how, but we're going to fix this. You didn't do anything wrong, Jason. You hear me? You didn't do anything wrong. Jason wanted to believe her. He really did. But the doubt was creeping in. What if they were right? What if, despite all his efforts, he wasn't good enough? What if this was just another reminder that the world would never give him a fair chance? Why is it always like this, Mom? Jason asked, his voice breaking. Why is it that when I do everything right, it's still not enough? Why does everything always seem to be stacked against us? His mother looked at him, her eyes filled with pain. She had never been one to sugarcoat things, but she had always told Jason that life wasn't fair. That the world could be cruel. But she had also taught him to fight back. To never back down. We're going to fight this, Jason, she said again, this time with more conviction. We won't let them take away what's yours. We won't let them make you feel like you're not enough. Jason nodded, though the doubt still lingered in his chest. He didn't know how this would end. He didn't know what the future held. But one thing was certain, he wasn't going to give up without a fight. The world had told him he couldn't do it. That no matter how hard he worked, he would never be enough. But Jason wasn't going to let that be his story. He wasn't going to let them punish him for doing everything right. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Jason's world had always been defined by obstacles. From the moment he could remember, life had been a series of uphill battles, some small, some so enormous they seemed insurmountable. But none of them had prepared him for this. None of them had prepared him for the crushing weight of an accusation so unfair, so out of place, that it threatened to unravel everything he had worked for. As Jason sat at the kitchen table, his mind raced. The scholarship was supposed to be his ticket out of his neighborhood, his escape from the constant struggle, the low expectations, the quiet whispers when people looked at him and saw a statistical outlier, not a human being with a future. He had spent years studying late into the night, making sacrifices, putting in effort that no one else could see. It was his way of proving that someone like him, someone from a community that had been left behind, could rise above it all. But now it felt like the world was closing in. Jason's thoughts drifted back to his early days, to the moments when he first realized that his dreams were different from the ones his classmates had. Growing up in a small house with peeling paint in a neighborhood where hope was a commodity most people couldn't afford, Jason learned early on that education was his way out. His mother, Lisa, had made sure he understood that. Every night, while she worked double shifts at the local diner, she would remind him, "You're smarter than you know, Jason. Don't let anyone tell you differently." Lisa had always been his rock, the one person who had believed in him without question. When Jason's father left when he was only 5, his world had shattered. There was no one to guide him, no one to show him what it meant to be a man. But his mother never wavered. She had given him everything, love, discipline, and the belief that he could do anything he set his mind to. She worked tirelessly to make sure he had opportunities. She had sacrificed her own dreams so that he could have the chance to pursue his. Every day, she wore herself thin so that Jason could wear the face of promise and hope. But life wasn't kind to Lisa. And it certainly wasn't kind to Jason. Back in elementary school, he had been a quiet, reserved kid, hiding behind books as his classmates ran around the playground. The teasing was subtle at first, just the occasional remark about how he talked too much for a black kid or how black kids don't belong in AP classes. It didn't take long for Jason to realize that for all his talent, his hard work, his potential, the world wasn't interested in seeing him succeed. And so, he'd made a vow to himself, he would not let them define him. By middle school, Jason was already making waves. His academic performance was flawless. The teachers started noticing him, not because of his race, but because of his intelligence. He had a natural ability to absorb information quickly, and with his determination, he was able to excel in every subject. He earned the title of class genius, but with that came a new set of challenges. He was no longer just the quiet kid who read books in the back of the classroom, he was the kid people envied. That was when the real trouble started. His friends, Malik and Sarah, had always been there for him. They were his support system, the two people he could count on when things got tough. Malik, with his quiet strength and easy smile, understood the pressure Jason faced, and Sarah, with her fierce loyalty and big heart, would always stand by him, even when the world turned its back. It was Malik who had first introduced him to the idea of higher education. "You know, Jay, you're gonna make it out. You're too smart not to. But you gotta go bigger than this town. This place will chew you up and spit you out if you let it." Sarah was the one who had helped him navigate through the maze of college applications. "You've got the grades, the talent, the drive. You can do this. You're gonna make them see you." Jason had always felt like an outsider, but those two believed in him when no one else did. They had been there through every late-night study session, every awkward conversation with teachers who didn't know how to relate to a kid like him. They had been there through his triumphs and failures, through his doubts and his hopes. They were his family in a way that his biological family couldn't always be. So, when he had received the letter confirming his scholarship to the prestigious university, it was supposed to be the culmination of all his hard work, the moment he could finally breathe easy. It wasn't just a scholarship, it was validation. It was the answer to every doubt he had ever had about his place in the world. It was proof that all his sacrifices had been worth it. But now, in an instant, everything was crumbling. Jason remembered the first time he had met his college admissions counselor. A white woman with an aura of confidence and authority, she had told him, "Jason, you've got a real shot at making it into the Ivy League. But you've got to keep pushing yourself. It's a tough world out there, and they won't give you anything for free. You'll have to earn it, every step of the way." Those words had stuck with him. You'll have to earn it. Jason had always known that. He had always known that his accomplishments would be questioned, his abilities scrutinized. But he had also believed that his work ethic, his intelligence, his perseverance would be enough to see him through. What he didn't expect was to be accused of cheating. What he didn't expect was to have everything he worked for yanked out from under him in an instant. The shame of it all hit him hard. He could already hear the whispers, hear the doubts. "I told you he wasn't good enough. He probably cheated to get those grades. He doesn't belong here." Jason's heart raced again, the fear of losing everything overwhelming. The worst part was, it wasn't just about the scholarship anymore. It wasn't just about the university. It was about the system, the world that had been set up for him to fail. It was about how hard he had fought to be seen as more than the color of his skin, only to be knocked down for doing everything right. The knock on the door jolted him out of his thoughts. It was Malik and Sarah. They had seen the letter. They had already started making phone calls to find out what was going on. "We're gonna fix this, Jay," Malik said with a firm expression. "We're gonna fight for you. You didn't do anything wrong." Sarah nodded in agreement, her eyes filled with resolve. "We're in this together. They can't do this to you." Jason felt a flicker of hope rise in his chest. Maybe, just maybe, they were right. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe this was the beginning of a fight for what was rightfully his. The thought of it sent a chill down his spine. The battle ahead wouldn't be easy. But Jason had learned one thing throughout his life: he wasn't going to give up without a fight. The days following the arrival of the scholarship suspension letter felt like a blur. Jason tried to stay focused on school and keep his mind occupied, but the cloud of uncertainty hung over him like a storm ready to break. His thoughts kept circling back to the accusation, the words on the paper that seemed so out of place yet so impossible to ignore. Suspicious discrepancies. He couldn't shake them. Every time he thought about it, the words twisted in his stomach. He had never cheated. Not once. His whole life had been defined by the idea that hard work would eventually pay off. But now, it felt like the world was telling him that no matter how hard he worked, it would never be enough. Jason sat in his bedroom, staring at his homework, the same pile of assignments he had been avoiding for the past few days. He had always prided himself on his academic discipline, his ability to tackle any challenge head-on. But today, his mind was elsewhere, lost in the overwhelming fear of what was happening. His phone buzzed, and he glanced down. It was Malik. "Yo, we need to talk." "Call me," the text read. Jason hesitated for a moment before tapping the phone screen to dial. Malik answered after the first ring, his voice full of urgency. "Jason, man, we got some updates," Malik said quickly, his tone sharp. "I did some digging, and I found out that the university flagged your exam because of a statistical anomaly. Apparently, your scores were too high, too perfect. They've been reviewing your entire academic record." Jason felt his pulse quicken. "What does that mean?" "I didn't cheat, Malik. You know that." "I know you didn't, man. I'm not saying you did. But the way they see it, they think your results are outliers. Like someone else might have been helping you. They're looking at it like you had some unfair advantage." Jason's mind was racing. He knew he was smart, but was he really that exceptional? Was his performance too good to be true? He had always believed that if he did everything right, worked harder, studied longer, pushed himself further, he would succeed. But now, his success felt like a curse. "So, what do we do now?" Jason asked, his voice quieter than usual. "How do I prove this wasn't a fluke? How do I make them believe I did everything on my own?" Malik was silent for a moment, and Jason could hear him shuffling papers in the background. "I think the first step is to talk to the admissions office directly. I'm not saying it'll be easy, but we've got to force them to look at the facts. If they're questioning your test results, then we need to present all the proof we can that you earned everything you've achieved." Jason exhaled slowly, trying to steady himself. It was becoming clear that this wasn't just about clearing his name. This was about fighting a system that was designed to question his worth from the very beginning. "Okay," Jason said, his voice gaining some strength. "We'll talk to them. I'm not letting this go without a fight." "Good. We'll handle it together, man. We got your back." As the conversation ended, Jason sat there for a moment, staring at his phone. His hands were still shaking, but now there was a fire in his chest. He wasn't going to let them take away everything he had worked for. Not without a fight. His thoughts shifted to his mother. Lisa had been his rock, the person who had always told him that if he did everything right, nothing could stop him. But now, he was starting to wonder if everything she had taught him about hard work and integrity was a lie. If someone like him, who followed every rule, worked harder than anyone else, and stayed true to his values, was still going to be punished for something he didn't do, what did that say about the world? The anger bubbled up in him, but Jason swallowed it. He couldn't let his emotions cloud his judgment. He had to be strategic. He had to think carefully about the next steps. There were too many people watching now. He had become a symbol of something larger than himself. If he gave in to despair, he would be sending a message to everyone who was counting on him, that they, too, would be crushed under the weight of a system that refused to believe in them. The next morning, Jason woke early. His mother was already gone for her shift, and the house was eerily quiet. He grabbed a piece of toast and sat down at the kitchen table, going over his plan for the day. Malik had arranged for them to meet at the university later that afternoon to speak with the admissions office. They would go through every piece of evidence Jason had, his grades, his test scores, the recommendations from his teachers, and prove that he deserved his spot at the university. But as he sat there, his mind kept drifting back to the letter. He couldn't shake the feeling that something more was at play here. This wasn't just about an isolated mistake or a statistical anomaly. This was about something deeper. Something insidious. He had already started to feel the weight of being a statistical outlier in a world that refused to believe in his success. The idea that someone like him, a young black boy from a poor neighborhood, could outperform everyone else felt uncomfortable to some people. And the truth was, no matter how hard he fought, no matter how much proof he had, some people would never see him as more than the color of his skin. Jason grabbed his backpack and headed for the door, trying to push the negative thoughts from his mind. Today was the day he would start fighting back. But the road ahead was going to be long, and Jason knew that every step would be uphill. He would have to navigate a system that didn't believe in him, a world that had already decided who he was, before he even had a chance to define himself. As he stepped out the door, the sun was rising, casting long shadows across the street. For a moment, Jason stood still, taking a deep breath, and then, with renewed determination, he started walking toward the bus stop. He wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not ever. The air in the admissions office was stifling. Jason sat in the uncomfortable chair, feeling as though he were a specimen in a lab rather than a young man seeking justice. Malik and Sarah sat beside him, their presence a small comfort, but even their reassuring glances couldn't fully calm the storm inside him. They had been waiting for what felt like hours, the ticking of the clock louder in the silence than it had any right to be. Jason's mind raced with possibilities, none of them pleasant. He kept imagining the worst-case scenarios, being dismissed, ignored, or worse, having his dream ripped away without so much as an explanation. The door finally opened with a soft click, and a woman in her late 40s stepped into the room. She wore a crisp blazer and had an air of authority about her, but her expression was unreadable. She introduced herself as Dr. Evelyn Price, the head of admissions at the university. "Jason Harris?" she asked, her voice smooth, almost too practiced. Jason stood up, and Malik followed suit, standing close to him, as if offering silent solidarity. Sarah's eyes were sharp, scanning the room, her posture tense. "Yes, that's me," Jason said, his voice steady but carrying the weight of everything he was about to face. "I've come to talk about the suspension of my scholarship." Dr. Price nodded and gestured for them to sit back down. "I understand you have some concerns. Please, tell me what's on your mind." Jason could feel his heart pounding in his chest as he opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his throat. How could he explain to this woman what it felt like to be questioned, doubted, and blamed for something he had never done? How could he put into words the injustice of it all without sounding like he was making excuses? Malik cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "Jason's here because he wants to clear his name. The accusations about cheating." "I know what the issue is," Dr. Price interjected smoothly, not unkindly. "The university received reports that your test scores were flagged for statistical anomalies. We take matters like this very seriously, Jason. It's part of our responsibility to ensure fairness for all students." Jason felt his stomach twist. The word fairness felt like a slap in the face. "I've worked my entire life to get to this point, Dr. Price," Jason said, his voice gaining strength. "I didn't cheat. Everything I've accomplished, every grade, every test score, it's all mine. I've put in more work than most people realize. So, I'm asking you to look at my record and see for yourself. The proof is there." Dr. Price leaned back in her chair, folding her arms across her chest. Her eyes didn't leave Jason's face, and he felt the weight of her gaze as if she were analyzing him, trying to figure out if he was lying. But Jason knew the truth. He had nothing to hide. "I've reviewed your record, Jason," Dr. Price said, her voice low and calm. "Your grades are impressive, no doubt about that. But you must understand, when a student performs at your level, at such a high level, it raises questions. We can't ignore that. We have a responsibility to ensure that all of our students are treated equally, and that means we have to look closely when something doesn't fit the pattern." Jason clenched his fists at his sides, trying to keep his frustration from boiling over. "So, because I'm black, and because my test scores are higher than what you expect, you think I must have cheated? Is that what you're saying?" Dr. Price's expression shifted slightly, but she didn't answer immediately. Instead, she glanced down at the papers in front of her, then back up at Jason. "I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that the system flagged your scores, and that's something we need to address. We can't just ignore it." Jason's heart felt heavy, and it wasn't just from the weight of the accusation. It was the realization that this wasn't about proving he had done something wrong. This was about proving that his success, his hard-earned success, was legitimate. And the way they were making him prove it felt wrong on every level. Sarah, who had been silent up until this point, finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. "With all due respect, Dr. Price, the question isn't whether Jason's scores are high or low. It's about why you're questioning a black student's success in the first place. If he were white, would you be having this conversation?" Dr. Price's eyes flickered for a moment, and Jason saw something almost imperceptible in her expression, an acknowledgement, perhaps, that there was more at play here than she had initially considered. But she quickly masked it, her demeanor once again professional. "We need to follow protocol, Sarah," Dr. Price said, her tone clipped. "The university has standards, and we must adhere to them. I'm not making a judgment on Jason's character or his abilities. I'm simply following the rules." Jason's chest tightened. This wasn't just about rules. This was about an inherent distrust in his abilities, a belief that someone who looked like him couldn't possibly have earned such success on his own. It was the same mentality that had followed him throughout his life, the constant underestimation, the quiet disbelief when he outperformed his peers. "Is there any way to prove my scores are legitimate?" Jason asked, his voice steady, though his hands were trembling. "Can we take a new test or provide more evidence? I'll do whatever it takes." Dr. Price paused, as if weighing her options. Finally, she nodded. "I'll speak with the testing center and see if there's any way to conduct a retest or provide further validation. But understand that this process can take time. And there's no guarantee that we'll be able to reverse the decision immediately." Jason swallowed hard, trying to fight back the emotions that were threatening to spill over. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about everything he had fought for, everything his mother had sacrificed for. The future he had dreamed of felt so close, yet now it seemed farther away than ever. He stood up, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. "I'll wait for your decision, then. But I'll say this, I earned my place here. No one is going to take that away from me." With those words, he turned and walked out of the office, his heart heavy but determined. The battle had only just begun, but Jason knew one thing for sure, he wouldn't give up without a fight. The days that followed were a blur of restless nights and tense mornings. Jason spent every moment that wasn't consumed by school or his part-time job thinking about the meeting at the admissions office. The uncertainty, the waiting, was slowly eating at him. He couldn't focus on his schoolwork. He couldn't focus on anything except the looming question, what would happen next? The university had promised a response, but the silence was deafening. Every time he checked his phone, he expected an email, a phone call, something. But nothing came. It was as if the world was waiting for him to fade into the background, to accept whatever decision they handed down, and to move on. But Jason couldn't do that. Not this time. He sat in the corner of his room one night, the dim light from his desk lamp casting long shadows on the walls. His textbooks lay scattered around him, untouched. He couldn't bring himself to study, not with everything that was hanging in the balance. He ran a hand through his hair, feeling the tension in his neck and shoulders. The weight of it all was beginning to crush him. Then, his phone buzzed. Jason's heart leapt into his throat. It was an email from Dr. Price. With trembling hands, he opened it. Subject: Follow-up on scholarship suspension. Dear Jason. We have reviewed the concerns you raised during our last meeting. The committee has decided to grant a conditional re-evaluation of your academic record. A new test will be scheduled, and we will review the results carefully. Please be aware that the process will take time, and a final decision will be made once all reviews are complete. Thank you for your patience. Sincerely. Dr. Evelyn Price. Head of Admissions. Jason read the email several times, trying to understand what it meant. It was neither a victory nor a defeat. It was a temporary reprieve. A conditional re-evaluation meant he wasn't off the hook, and the university wasn't backing down. The battle wasn't over. He slumped against his chair, exhaling slowly. The uncertainty was now even more unbearable. He would have to prove himself again, and in the meantime, the fear of being dismissed still loomed large. It felt like running a race where the finish line kept moving farther away. He felt a hand on his shoulder, and he turned to see Malik standing in the doorway. Malik's face was a mixture of concern and determination. Hey, man, I saw the email, Malik said, his voice soft but firm. It's not the news we were hoping for, but it's something. You've got another shot. You can do this. Jason looked up at his friend, his eyes tired and distant. I don't know if I can, Malik. It feels like no matter what I do, they're just gonna find a reason to doubt me. To keep me out. Malik stepped into the room and sat down beside him. Don't think like that, Jason. You've already proven what you're capable of. This is just one hurdle. They're making you jump through hoops, sure, but you've got the skills to clear them. You just have to keep fighting. Jason swallowed, feeling a lump form in his throat. It wasn't just the pressure of the scholarship that was weighing on him, it was everything. The systemic barriers, the expectations, the stereotypes. It felt like the harder he tried, the harder the world pushed back. I'm just tired, Jason whispered, his voice barely audible. I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this. I don't know if I'm strong enough. Malik's eyes softened. I get it, man. I do. But you've been through worse, right? You've always found a way to push through. This is just another challenge. One you can overcome. And we're gonna be right here with you. You're not alone in this. For a moment, Jason didn't say anything. He just stared at the floor, letting the quiet fill the room. He wanted to believe Malik, wanted to believe that everything he had worked for wasn't going to be ripped away. But the weight of the situation was starting to feel suffocating. It was more than just the scholarship, it was the fear that his entire future was hinged on the opinions of people who had already made up their minds about him before he'd even walked into that admissions office. His phone buzzed again, pulling him from his thoughts. This time, it was a text from his mother. Mom, how's everything going, baby? I've been praying for you. Stay strong. Jason stared at the message for a long time. The simple words from his mother brought a sense of comfort, but they also deepened the ache in his chest. His mother had sacrificed so much for him to have the opportunities he did. He couldn't bear the thought of letting her down, of failing her after everything she had done. He typed back quickly. Jason, I'm trying, Mom. It's just really hard right now. I don't know what to do. Mom, I know it's hard. But you're built for this, Jason. I believe in you. Keep going. Jason put the phone down and closed his eyes, letting the words sink in. He was tired. So tired. But he knew his mother, his family, and his friends were counting on him. They were believing in him when he wasn't sure he could believe in himself. I'm gonna do it, Jason said aloud, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. I'm not giving up. I'll take that test, and I'll prove them wrong. I'll prove that I belong here. Malik gave him a small, knowing smile. That's the spirit, man. Jason stood up, his legs shaky but determined. He wasn't going to let the fear win. Not this time. The road ahead was uncertain, but as long as he had his friends and family by his side, he would keep moving forward. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore, he was fighting for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong, everyone who had ever been overlooked or underestimated. He was fighting for the future that was still within his reach. The day of the retest arrived faster than Jason had expected. His stomach churned with a mix of anticipation and dread, as though every nerve in his body was firing at once. He woke up early, earlier than usual, and stared at the clock. The hands seemed to move slower today, mocking his anxiety as he waited for the day to unfold. He had studied, but not with the same confidence he usually carried. The weight of the past few weeks had dulled his sharpness. It wasn't just about acing the test anymore, it was about proving that he deserved to be there, proving that his success wasn't a fluke, and that he wasn't going to let the system push him out just because of his skin color. He dressed slowly, his movements deliberate, trying to calm the racing thoughts in his head. When he finally walked out of his room, he saw his mom in the kitchen, packing her bag for work. "Hey, Mom," Jason said, his voice quieter than usual. His mom looked up, her face warm and encouraging, as always. "Hey, baby. You ready for today?" Jason nodded, though he wasn't sure if he truly was. "I guess. Just a little nervous." She walked over to him and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've got this. You've been working for this moment your whole life. Trust in yourself, Jason. You've earned your place here." The simple words of reassurance grounded him for a moment, but the weight of what was ahead still lingered. The test was scheduled for 10 a.m., and he had to be at the university by 9:30. It was a tight timeline, and there was no room for error. "I'll be thinking of you," his mom added with a soft smile. "Remember, you're not just taking a test. You're showing them who you are." Jason returned her smile with a nod, trying to commit the words to memory. "You're showing them who you are." It wasn't just about the numbers on a test sheet, it was about his entire journey. Everything he'd done, everything he'd fought for, was on the line. The drive to the university was quiet. Malik and Sarah had offered to come with him, but Jason needed to be alone with his thoughts. The weight of it all was too heavy for small talk. The car hummed along the road, the familiar buildings and streets outside almost feeling like a dream, like a memory he wasn't sure was his to claim. When Jason finally arrived at the university, he took a deep breath and parked in his usual spot. The campus felt the same as always, full of students hustling between classes, talking, laughing, just living. It was hard to imagine how this place, so full of life and potential, could have become such a battleground in his mind. He walked toward the testing center, his heart pounding. The closer he got, the heavier his steps felt, as though the weight of the world was growing with each footstep. He didn't even notice how fast he was walking until he reached the door to the building. Inside, the sterile, quiet atmosphere of the testing room greeted him. A few students were already seated at their desks, preparing for their own exams. The proctor, a middle-aged man with glasses, glanced at Jason as he entered, but didn't acknowledge him beyond a curt nod. Jason walked to his assigned seat at the front of the room. The blank page in front of him felt like a challenge, a battle. The silence in the room seemed to amplify every noise, every shuffle of paper, every soft cough. The proctor gave a brief set of instructions, and then the test began. Jason didn't look at the clock. He couldn't afford to. He had to focus, had to ignore the nagging voices in his head telling him that it wouldn't be enough, that it wasn't just about doing well on this test, but about being judged on a scale he couldn't control. The questions came easy at first, simple, straightforward problems that didn't take much thought. Jason moved quickly, his pencil flying across the paper, confident in his ability to solve them all. But as the test continued, the questions became more difficult. They were designed to challenge students, to push them to the limits of their knowledge. Jason's heart rate increased, but he forced himself to stay calm, to keep going, to finish strong. He could feel the eyes of the proctor on him from time to time, but he ignored it. He had to. There was no room for doubt now. No room for the fear that had been gnawing at him for weeks. This was his chance to show them, to show everyone, that he wasn't just another statistic. The final question arrived, and Jason paused, his pencil hovering above the page. The room seemed impossibly quiet now, the air thick with the weight of expectation. This was the moment. The one that would decide everything. Taking a deep breath, Jason carefully read the question. It was one of the hardest he had faced, but he had prepared for this. He'd studied for this moment. Slowly, he began to write, his mind clear as he worked through the problem step by step. When the timer beeped, signaling the end of the test, Jason sat back in his chair, exhausted but satisfied. He had done it. He had given it his all. Hours later, Jason received an email from Dr. Price, the head of admissions. His hands shook as he clicked the message open, but as he read the words on the screen, he felt his heart sink. Subject, Test Results and Review. Dear Jason, thank you for taking the re-evaluation test today. The results have been reviewed by the committee, and while they do show improvement in certain areas, we regret to inform you that we cannot reinstate your scholarship at this time. We acknowledge your hard work, but the statistical anomalies remain a concern. We encourage you to seek other opportunities for funding. Best regards. Dr. Evelyn Price, Head of Admissions. Jason stared at the screen, the words blurring as he fought back the tears. It wasn't enough. No matter how hard he worked, no matter how much he proved himself, it still wasn't enough. He sat in silence, the weight of the world pressing down on him once again. Everything he had fought for, everything he had sacrificed, it all felt like it had been for nothing. The promise of a future, a chance to succeed, had been taken away in the blink of an eye. But even as despair settled over him, a spark of determination began to burn in his chest. This wasn't the end. Not yet. He would keep fighting. He would find another way. Jason sat at his desk, the cold glow of his laptop screen illuminating his face as he stared at the email from Dr. Price. The words were still etched in his mind, replaying over and over like an unwanted song. Statistical anomalies remain a concern. No matter how much effort he put in, no matter how many hours he'd spent studying, it had all been for nothing. He could feel the bitterness rise up in his chest. He hadn't expected it to be easy, but he hadn't expected to be knocked down again so soon. His future was slipping away, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. With a heavy sigh, he closed his laptop and dropped his head into his hands. The weight of disappointment was crushing, but it wasn't just his disappointment, it was his mom's, his friends, his entire community's. They had all believed in him, and now he felt like he was failing them, too. I'm not good enough. Maybe I never was. A knock on his door pulled him from his thoughts. Jason wiped his face quickly, trying to hide his emotions, but he knew it was too late. Malik stepped in, his expression serious but kind. You okay, man? Malik asked, his voice low. Jason shook his head. No, I'm not. I thought I could prove them wrong. I thought this test would be my chance. But it doesn't matter how hard I try. I'll never be enough for them. Malik stepped inside, closing the door behind him. He sat down on Jason's bed, his eyes scanning the room before settling on his friend. Jason, listen to me. This test. This is just one chapter. Don't let it be the whole book. Jason lifted his head, his voice laced with frustration. I don't know how many chapters one have left, Malik. What if this is the last one? Malik leaned forward, his tone firm. Don't think like that. You've been through so much worse, and you've come out stronger every time. You've got more fight in you than anyone I know. So, no, this is not the end. Not even close. Jason stared at Malik, a mix of disbelief and exhaustion in his eyes. It was hard to accept that he had more fight left. It felt like he was running on fumes, but Malik's words seemed to cut through the noise in his head, reminding him of what he had already accomplished, what he had already overcome. I don't know if I can keep doing this, Jason admitted quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. I feel like I'm just being pushed around by forces I can't control. No matter how hard I try, it's like the world has already decided who I am. Malik's eyes softened, but his voice remained unwavering. That's the thing, though, Jay. You can't control everything, but you can control how you respond to it. You've already proven that time and time again. And you know what? There are other ways. You just have to keep looking for them. The scholarship? That's not the only door. It's just a door. There are others. Jason sat back, the weight of his friend's words sinking in. Malik was right. The scholarship had felt like the only way, the only chance. But maybe there were other opportunities, other paths to success that didn't rely on the judgment of others. Maybe the test was just a part of the journey, not the destination. But as Jason thought about it, another question weighed on his mind. But what about everything else? All the barriers? It's like every time I try to move forward, something gets in my way. Malik shrugged, an almost imperceptible smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Yeah, man, life's full of obstacles. You think I don't know that? But it's not the obstacles that define you. It's what you do when they show up. Do you quit? Do you let them win? Or do you keep fighting? Keep pushing until you find a way around them? Jason paused. His mind replayed the countless times he had struggled. The whispers he had heard about how kids like him couldn't make it. The doubts that had been planted in his head by others, but also by his own insecurities. He had internalized them, let them define who he was. But no more. It was time to break free of that. He straightened up, his shoulders squaring with a renewed sense of resolve. You're right. I can't let this define me. I can't let this one test be the thing that breaks me. If I'm going to keep moving forward, I need to find another way. Malik grinned. That's what I'm talking about. Jason nodded, a small spark of hope igniting within him. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but he was done sitting on the sidelines, done waiting for someone to hand him a victory. He was going to create his own. But there was one thing he needed to do before moving forward, he needed to confront the very people who had made him feel like an outsider. He had to face Dr. Price, and the admissions committee, not just as a student, but as someone who had been unjustly treated. Jason had always been a model student, always done what was expected of him, yet somehow, that hadn't been enough. I'm going to write them a letter, Jason said suddenly. His voice was steady now, full of purpose. A letter that says everything I've been holding in. I'm going to tell them exactly how this has been affecting me. And I'm going to make sure they know that I'm not going to let them decide my future for me. Malik raised an eyebrow. You really think they're going to listen? Jason nodded, the fire in his chest burning brighter. I don't know. But I do know this, if I don't speak up, nothing will change. And I've spent too long letting people tell me what I can't do. Now, I'm going to tell them what I can do. The next day, Jason sat down at his desk and began to write the letter. His hand moved across the page as the words poured out, raw and unfiltered. He talked about his journey, about the obstacles he had faced, and about the systemic barriers that had held him back. He wrote about the countless times he had pushed himself, only to be told it wasn't enough. And most importantly, he wrote about the dream he had, the dream to be seen for who he truly was, and not just as a number on a page or a statistic in a report. When he finished, he sat back and read it over. It was a piece of his soul laid bare, and while he wasn't sure it would change anything, he knew it was a step toward reclaiming his power. With one final breath, he clicked send. The days following Jason's letter felt like an eternity. He checked his email obsessively, hoping for some sign that his message had been received, that someone had heard him. But the inbox remained silent. The world around him seemed to move on as if nothing had changed. Students at the university were going about their days, their routines unbroken, while Jason was stuck in a limbo of uncertainty and frustration. He tried to push the thoughts aside, focusing instead on his classes and keeping his head down. It was easier that way, right? Pretend nothing was wrong, keep up the appearance of normalcy. But that never worked for long. Every time he sat in a lecture hall, every time he saw the smiles of his peers, it was as though a weight pressed against his chest. He couldn't forget that he was fighting a battle, one that no one else seemed to understand. Then, late one afternoon, as he sat in the library, his phone buzzed. The familiar sound caught him off guard, and his heart skipped a beat. It was an email. Jason tapped the screen eagerly, his hands trembling slightly as he opened the message. Subject: Acknowledgement of your message. Dear Jason. Thank you for your heartfelt letter. We acknowledge the concerns you raised and want to assure you that your voice has been heard. While your past academic performance has been exemplary, we understand that systemic issues are part of a larger conversation that cannot be ignored. After further review and discussion with the committee, we are offering you a chance to meet with us to discuss alternative paths forward, including potential scholarships, mentorship opportunities, and a re-evaluation of your status in our program. We believe your resilience and determination deserve recognition, and we want to explore how we can support your journey. Sincerely, Dr. Evelyn Price, Head of Admissions. Jason's eyes widened as he reread the email. For the first time in weeks, he felt a surge of hope. The words alternative paths forward, potential scholarships, and mentorship opportunities stood out like a beacon in the darkness. He wasn't sure what this would lead to, but it was a start. It was a chance, something he hadn't allowed himself to believe in for a while. He couldn't contain the smile that spread across his face. For a brief moment, the weight of the past few weeks seemed to lift, replaced by a sense of possibility. This wasn't over. Not yet. He leaned back in his chair, letting the reality of the situation settle in. The battle wasn't won, not by a long shot, but at least now it felt like the fight was worth it. He had made a difference. His voice had been heard. And that, in itself, was a victory. The meeting was scheduled for the following week. Jason spent the days leading up to it with a renewed sense of purpose. He studied for his classes, but more than that, he prepared himself mentally for the conversation that was about to take place. This wasn't just about one more test. This was about his entire future. It was about challenging the system that had tried to push him aside, to tell him that his value was limited by factors outside of his control. He talked to Malik and Sarah about the meeting, and both of them were supportive, though Malik could sense the underlying anxiety that still lingered in his friend's eyes. Hey, man, whatever happens in that meeting, you've already made an impact, Malik said, clapping Jason on the back. You stood up for yourself. You said what needed to be said. Jason nodded, but there was still a knot in his stomach. I don't know. What if it's just a gesture, you know? What if they're just doing this to look good, and nothing really changes? Sarah chimed in from her spot on the couch, her voice gentle but firm. Even if that's the case, you still made them acknowledge you. You still forced them to confront something they probably would have rather ignored. And that's power, Jason. You've got power now. Jason couldn't argue with that. They were right. He had started something, and now, he had to keep pushing forward. He couldn't afford to let doubt creep in. Not now. The day of the meeting arrived, and Jason made his way to the admissions office with a mix of nerves and determination. As he walked through the familiar hallways, it almost felt surreal to be heading in the direction of the very people who had once held his future in their hands. Now, it was up to him to prove that his future was his to decide. He arrived at the office a little early, his heart racing in anticipation. The receptionist smiled at him as he signed in, but he could see the curiosity in her eyes. She must have wondered what had brought him here. Students didn't typically request meetings with the head of admissions unless something important was at stake. Jason didn't have to wait long before a door opened and Dr. Price stepped into the lobby. She was exactly as Jason remembered, tall, composed, her sharp eyes giving away nothing as she gestured for him to follow her. "Jason," Dr. Price greeted, her tone neutral but not unkind. "Thank you for coming in today." "Thank you for meeting with me," Jason replied, his voice steady despite the nerves swirling in his stomach. She led him into a small conference room and gestured for him to sit. The room was well lit, clean, and stark, nothing to distract from the serious conversation that was about to take place. Jason sat across from Dr. Price, feeling both the weight of the moment and the strange sense of calm that had washed over him. "I've read your letter," Dr. Price began, folding her hands neatly in front of her. "And I want to acknowledge the points you made. The committee has taken your concerns seriously. This process is not perfect, and we realize that." Jason felt his throat tighten as she spoke. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was validation that he hadn't just been ignored. That his voice had made a difference. "We've decided to offer you an opportunity for a revised scholarship application," Dr. Price continued. "And we'd like to pair you with a mentor who will help guide you through the next steps, not just academically, but also professionally." Jason blinked, taken aback. "A mentor?" he asked, his voice low. "You mean someone who'll help me with the whole process?" "That's right. We want to help you succeed," Dr. Price said, her tone softening slightly. "But you'll need to continue demonstrating the same dedication you've shown so far. This is not just about meeting expectations, it's about surpassing them." Jason sat back, trying to process the offer. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. A second chance. Something he could work with. He nodded slowly. "I'll do whatever it takes. Thank you for giving me this opportunity." Dr. Price gave him a rare, faint smile. "It's up to you now, Jason. But I believe in your potential. You've shown us that." As he left the office, Jason felt a weight lift off his shoulders. This wasn't the end, but it was a turning point. A chance to prove that he wasn't just a student in the system, he was someone who could change the game. And Jason was determined to do just that. The following weeks seemed to pass by in a blur. Jason felt like he was living in two worlds, one where everything seemed uncertain and overwhelming, and another where he was beginning to see a glimmer of possibility. The scholarship application, the mentor opportunity, and the promise of a fresh start filled his days, but they didn't erase the undercurrent of tension that lingered. There was always that question in the back of his mind: was this really going to make a difference? Would the changes be enough to make him feel seen, valued, and truly supported? Or was this just a fleeting gesture, a way for the system to tick a box and move on? It was late one afternoon when he received an email with the subject line, "Your mentor has been assigned." Jason opened it eagerly, his heart beating a little faster as he scanned the message. The email introduced him to Dr. Marcus Hayes, a professor in the university's psychology department, who had agreed to take Jason on as a mentee. Dr. Hayes had a reputation for being a strong advocate for underrepresented students and had worked on a number of projects aimed at dismantling academic inequalities. "Dr. Hayes is looking forward to meeting you and is available for a one-on-one meeting next week to discuss your goals and begin mapping out a plan for your academic and professional growth," the email concluded. Jason couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. Dr. Hayes had a solid reputation, and knowing he had a mentor who was familiar with the challenges Jason faced made the whole situation seem more tangible. For the first time in a long while, Jason felt like he wasn't navigating this world alone. The following week, Jason met Dr. Hayes in his office. The space was cozy but professional, filled with bookshelves stacked high with academic texts, a few framed certificates on the wall, and a window overlooking the university's quad. Dr. Hayes himself was a man in his mid-40s, with short graying hair, glasses perched on his nose, and a warm smile that immediately made Jason feel at ease. Jason, it's great to finally meet you, Dr. Hayes said, extending a hand. I've heard a lot about you. Your letter to the admissions committee really stood out. Jason shook his hand, a little surprised by the warmth in the older man's demeanor. Thank you. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I'm glad to be here. Dr. Hayes gestured to the chair across from his desk. Please, have a seat. Let's talk. As Jason sat down, Dr. Hayes began the conversation in a way that felt natural and unforced. I want to hear your story, Jason. What brought you to this point? What are the challenges you've faced so far, and what are you hoping to achieve moving forward? Jason hesitated for a moment, unsure where to start. But then, as he spoke, the words seemed to flow more easily than he had expected. He talked about growing up, about the pressure of always being the perfect student, about his desire to prove people wrong, and about the hurdles he'd faced along the way. He mentioned his struggles with feeling like an outsider in a world that didn't always have a place for someone like him. Dr. Hayes listened intently, nodding occasionally. There was no judgment in his eyes, just understanding. When Jason finally fell silent, the older man leaned forward slightly, his voice thoughtful. Jason, you've clearly been through a lot. But you've also shown incredible resilience. I can tell that you have a fire inside you, one that isn't going to burn out easily. Jason nodded, though he felt a bit uncomfortable with the praise. I just feel like I've been fighting this whole time, you know. Like, no matter how hard I work, there's always something or someone telling me I'm not enough. That's an experience far too many of our students face, Dr. Hayes replied, his tone serious. But here's the thing. The world may not always recognize your value right away. It may not always give you the credit you deserve. But that doesn't mean you're not worthy of it. And it doesn't mean you don't have a place in this world. Your worth isn't defined by the setbacks or the obstacles you encounter, it's defined by how you respond to them. Jason felt a small flicker of hope at Dr. Hayes' words. Maybe, just maybe, he was starting to believe that. So, how do I move forward? Jason asked, his voice a little quieter now, almost tentative. I've been stuck for so long. I'm not sure where to go from here. Dr. Hayes smiled. That's exactly what we're going to figure out together. But first, let's talk about some of your goals. What do you want to achieve, not just in your academic life, but in the bigger picture? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Jason thought for a moment, a little taken aback by the question. In 5 years? I don't really know, honestly. I mean, I want to graduate, obviously. I want to prove that I can make it through this, even when everyone said I couldn't. But beyond that, I don't really know. That's okay, Dr. Hayes said, nodding in understanding. It's completely normal not to have everything figured out. But here's the thing, we're going to start with the basics. First, let's focus on what you can control. Let's make sure you're getting the support you need academically, and let's develop a strategy for you to thrive. After that, we can start looking at bigger goals, career goals, life goals, things that excite you. Jason felt a weight lift off his chest. Dr. Hayes wasn't pressuring him to have everything figured out. Instead, he was offering a roadmap to help him get there, step by step. I think that sounds like a good place to start, Jason said, feeling a sense of relief he hadn't experienced in a long time. I can do that. Dr. Hayes leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. We're going to work together to build your confidence and your skills. It's going to take time, and there will be bumps along the way. But I have no doubt you can make it through. And we're going to make sure you have the tools to succeed. Jason felt the weight of Dr. Hayes' words sink in. This wasn't just about surviving the next semester or getting through a tough class. This was about reshaping the way he saw himself and the world around him. With Dr. Hayes in his corner, he felt like he had a chance to build a future that was truly his. As Jason left the meeting, he couldn't help but feel a small but significant shift in his mindset. Maybe he wasn't defined by his setbacks after all. Maybe he could carve out a path, no matter how uncertain it seemed. For the first time in a long time, Jason felt like he was on the right track. The next few weeks with Dr. Hayes proved to be both challenging and illuminating. Jason met with him regularly, each meeting more productive than the last. They discussed his strengths and weaknesses, the internalized pressure Jason had been carrying for years, and how he could begin to balance his academic responsibilities with his emotional well-being. But despite the growth Jason felt, there was one obstacle he could never seem to shake: the burden of expectations. As much as Dr. Hayes tried to help him manage his stress, the expectations that had followed Jason for most of his life never truly left him. The expectations of his family, his community, and, most overwhelmingly, himself. Jason had always been the perfect student, the one who made straight A's, who was praised for his intellect and ambition. But now, he was feeling the weight of those expectations like never before. In class, his professors were starting to take notice. Jason was acing his exams, participating in class discussions, and completing his assignments with the same dedication that had gotten him into the university in the first place. But there was something else that was creeping in, an undercurrent of pressure, a feeling that he had to be more than just a good student. He had to be the best. One afternoon, Jason found himself sitting in the university's student lounge, staring at his laptop screen, trying to finish an essay for his psychology class. It was a subject that Dr. Hayes had recommended for him, one that focused on identity and personal development. The irony wasn't lost on Jason. Here he was, writing about identity, when he still wasn't entirely sure of his own. The lounge was relatively quiet, save for a few students scattered around, absorbed in their own work. Jason's fingers hovered over the keyboard, but his mind kept wandering back to his conversation with his mother earlier that morning. "I just want you to succeed, Jason," she had said. "You have so much potential. Make sure you don't waste it. Make us proud." Jason had nodded, trying to hide the frustration he felt. It wasn't that he didn't appreciate his mother's encouragement. But it always felt like there was an unspoken pressure lurking behind her words. Succeed. Make us proud. Be perfect. His phone buzzed, breaking him out of his thoughts. It was a message from Malik. "Malik, yo, man. You good? You've been kinda quiet lately. Let's catch up tonight." Jason stared at the message for a moment before responding. "Jason, yeah, I'm good. Just a lot on my plate." "Malik, I get it. But you know you don't have to carry all that weight alone, right? Let's hang out tonight. Talk it through." Jason stared at the screen, feeling a strange sense of gratitude toward his friend. Malik had always been there for him, even when Jason didn't feel like he deserved it. He tapped out a quick reply. "Jason, thanks, man. Let's meet up later." That evening, Jason and Malik met at their usual spot, a small cafe near campus that stayed open late. The place had become their sanctuary over the years, a space where they could unwind, talk about life, or just escape from the pressures of their academic world. Jason arrived first, grabbing a booth in the back corner and setting down his laptop. He wasn't sure what he needed, but he hoped that talking it out with Malik would help ease some of the tension he'd been feeling. A few minutes later, Malik walked in, his usual carefree grin lighting up his face. "You know, I was starting to think you weren't going to show up," Malik joked, sliding into the booth across from Jason. Jason chuckled, though it felt forced. "Yeah, just been a little overwhelmed lately. You know how it is." Malik's eyes narrowed slightly, sensing the heaviness in Jason's tone. "I know, man. I know. You've been busting your ass, and I get it. But you don't have to do this alone." Jason rubbed his forehead, feeling the familiar tension build up. "It's not just the work, Malik. It's everything. It's like I can't escape these expectations. From my mom, from the school, from myself. I'm not even sure who I am outside of being a student anymore. Like, if I don't get straight A's or excel in everything, then I'm failing. Malik's expression softened. You're not failing, Jason. You're just human. And you don't have to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. I get it, man. I know you want to make everyone proud, but you've got to take care of yourself too. Jason looked down at his hands, feeling the weight of Malik's words. I don't know if I can stop. What happens if I just let go for a second? What if I stop being perfect? What if I fail? Malik leaned forward, his voice steady but firm. Jason, you're not failing. You're just putting a lot of pressure on yourself. The world's not gonna end if you miss a beat. You don't have to be perfect to be valuable. Jason felt a lump rise in his throat, and for the first time in weeks, he felt his eyes sting with tears. He quickly blinked them away, not wanting to seem weak in front of his friend. But Malik wasn't fazed. He just sat there, watching Jason, his expression open and understanding. You're not alone in this, Malik added quietly. I'm here. We're all here for you. But you've got to let us help you carry that weight. You don't have to be the only one holding it. Jason swallowed hard, his chest tight with emotion. I don't know how to stop trying to be perfect. I don't know how to just be me. You'll figure it out, Malik said, his voice soft but confident. And it's okay if it takes time. You don't have to have it all figured out right now. Just take it one step at a time. You're more than your grades or your accomplishments. You're more than the pressure. For a long moment, Jason sat in silence, letting Malik's words sink in. He wasn't sure if he could truly let go of the pressure, not yet. But for the first time in a long while, he felt like he didn't have to do it all alone. Later that night, as Jason made his way back to his dorm, the conversation with Malik played over and over in his mind. He still didn't have all the answers, but maybe that was okay. Maybe he didn't need to be perfect to be enough. The expectations would always be there, but perhaps it was time to redefine what they meant. Maybe he could focus less on being flawless and more on being whole. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Jason woke up the next morning with a sense of something unsettled lingering in the back of his mind. The previous night's conversation with Malik had helped, but it hadn't completely erased the pressure. It never did. Today was the day the scholarship committee would make its final decision on whether or not Jason had received the full funding he'd been counting on. It wasn't just about the money, though. This scholarship was the key to securing a future for himself, one where he didn't have to carry the weight of his family's expectations alone. A future where his dreams were no longer out of reach. But what if they didn't choose him? Jason stood in front of the mirror, staring at his reflection. He could barely recognize the person staring back at him. The ambitious, determined young man he'd always been felt like a shadow of himself now. In some ways, he felt smaller, as if the pressure of living up to other people's expectations had chipped away at his sense of who he really was. He adjusted his shirt, trying to shake off the nervousness swirling in his chest. It was just a scholarship. Just a piece of paper that would help him pay for school, right? But to him, it felt like so much more. It felt like the answer to a question he didn't even know how to ask yet. The day dragged on. Every minute felt like an hour as Jason sat in his lecture, his mind drifting back to the waiting email that would dictate so much of his future. The professor's voice was distant, a low hum in the background as Jason's thoughts raced. He had been doing everything right, keeping up with his grades, meeting with Dr. Hayes regularly, trying to find balance, reaching out to friends. He was pushing himself beyond what he thought was possible. And still, it didn't feel like enough. By the time the class ended, Jason couldn't sit still any longer. He pulled out his phone and checked his inbox. There it was, an email from the scholarship committee. Subject, your scholarship status. His finger hovered over the email for a long, agonizing moment. Should he open it? Was he ready to face whatever news awaited him? He took a deep breath, clicked the email open, and read the words on the screen. Dear Jason, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as one of our scholarship recipients for the upcoming academic year. After reviewing your application and your remarkable accomplishments, we believe you have the potential to make a significant impact on the world. Your dedication, perseverance, and passion for your field were clear to us, and we are excited to support you on your journey. Congratulations on your achievement. We look forward to seeing all that you will accomplish in the future. Sincerely, the Scholarship Committee. Jason's heart skipped a beat. He blinked, his hands shaking slightly as he reread the email, making sure his eyes weren't deceiving him. Selected. Scholarship recipient. For a few moments, the words didn't seem to sink in. But then, all at once, the reality hit him, and he felt an overwhelming wave of relief flood through his body. It was real. He had done it. Against all the odds, he had earned the scholarship he so desperately needed. His phone buzzed with a text from Malik. Malik, did you hear? Jason's fingers flew over the keyboard as he typed back. Jason, I got it. I actually got it. Malik, yes. Told you. You're a star, bro. Jason laughed out loud, a sound he hadn't heard from himself in a while. For the first time in weeks, he felt light, like a weight had been lifted off his chest. This was it. This was the moment he had been working toward. Later that day, Jason met Dr. Hayes to share the news. When he walked into Dr. Hayes' office, the older man looked up from his desk and immediately smiled. Well, Jason. I have a feeling I know why you're here, Dr. Hayes said, leaning back in his chair. Jason's grin was wide and genuine. I got the scholarship. I'm in. They picked me. Dr. Hayes stood up and extended a hand. I knew you could do it. Congratulations. This is a huge step forward, Jason. Jason shook Dr. Hayes' hand, the excitement still bubbling up inside him. I honestly didn't think I was going to make it. But now that I've got it, I don't know what to do next. That's normal, Dr. Hayes replied with a knowing smile. But you're on the right track. This scholarship is just the beginning. You've already shown you have the determination, but now you need to think about the next steps. Where do you want to go from here? Jason paused for a moment, considering the question. Where did he want to go? The scholarship was a door opening, but beyond that was a whole world of possibilities. For the first time in a long while, Jason allowed himself to dream beyond the expectations and pressures. What did he really want? I want to make a difference, Jason said slowly. I want to help people, especially kids like me. I want to show them that they can do more than just survive, they can thrive. Dr. Hayes nodded, clearly impressed by Jason's clarity. That's a powerful vision. And with the scholarship, you're one step closer to making it a reality. But remember, it won't always be easy. The road ahead is full of challenges. You'll face setbacks, doubts, and obstacles. But I have no doubt that you have the strength to overcome them. Jason nodded, feeling the weight of Dr. Hayes' words. He wasn't naive enough to think everything would be smooth sailing from here on out. But for the first time in a long time, he felt prepared. He felt like he could face whatever came next. That evening, Jason sat on his bed, the news still sinking in. The scholarship. His future. The weight of his family's expectations. It was all starting to make sense. As he pulled out his phone to text Malik, he realized something he hadn't quite understood before. The scholarship was more than just an opportunity. It was a chance to redefine success on his terms. It was his chance to stop living in the shadow of others' expectations and start creating his own path. The pressure would always be there, yes. But it no longer had to define him. The weeks following the announcement of the scholarship were a whirlwind. Jason was riding high on a wave of triumph, his heart full of hope, his mind filled with possibilities. But despite the celebration, Things weren't as easy as they seemed on the surface. Beneath the excitement of his achievement, Jason was quietly struggling with the very thing that had driven him to succeed, the pressure to do everything perfectly. At first, it felt like everything was falling into place. He had the scholarship, his grades were on track, and he was beginning to make some progress in understanding himself. But as the semester wore on, the cracks started to show. Every time he aced an exam or completed an assignment, the pressure only seemed to grow heavier. It wasn't just about doing well anymore. It was about doing better than everyone else. And each time he succeeded, he felt like he was setting the bar impossibly high for himself. Jason found himself staying up late into the night, revising papers over and over, convinced that they could always be improved. His classmates were often impressed with his work, but Jason couldn't shake the feeling that no matter how much he did, it wasn't enough. The scholarship, his grades, the constant drive to prove his worth, it all felt like a never-ending race, and Jason was running as fast as he could just to stay ahead. One afternoon, he sat in the library, hunched over a textbook, eyes glued to the pages. He had been there for hours, his mind struggling to absorb the material. The stress of trying to meet every expectation, both his own and others, was starting to take its toll. "Jason, hey," a voice interrupted his thoughts. He looked up to see Malik standing in front of him, a concerned look on his face. Jason forced a smile. "Hey, Malik. Just studying." Malik raised an eyebrow, clearly not buying the cheerful facade. "Studying? Man, you look like you're about to pass out. You've been here for hours. What's going on?" Jason shrugged, though he knew he couldn't hide the truth from Malik. "Just, trying to stay on top of things. You know how it is." Malik sat down across from him, his expression serious. "Yeah, I know. But I'm not talking about your grades or the scholarship. I'm talking about you. You're not okay, man. You've been pushing yourself way too hard." Jason leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "I don't have a choice, Malik. If I stop, if I take a break, I might fall behind. And if I fall behind—" Malik interrupted him, his tone gentle but firm. "If you fall behind, it doesn't mean you failed. But if you keep going like this, you will burn out. And trust me, it's not worth it." Jason's gaze dropped to his hands, his fingers tapping nervously on the edge of his textbook. He knew Malik was right, but the thought of letting go of the constant drive made him uneasy. He had built his entire identity around being the best, around being the one who could handle it all. If he stopped, would he still be Jason? Or would he lose the one thing that made him feel in control? "I don't know how to stop," Jason admitted, his voice quieter now. "It's like, if I stop trying to be perfect, then what am I? Who am I without all of this?" Malik's expression softened. "You're Jason, man. Not the perfect student, not the scholarship winner, not the one who always has it together. Just Jason. And that's enough." Jason shook his head, still unsure. "It doesn't feel like enough." "I get it," Malik said, leaning forward. "But what happens if you're too focused on being perfect that you miss everything else? The people who care about you, the things that make life worth living?" Jason sat there in silence, the weight of Malik's words sinking in. He had been so focused on achieving his goals that he had forgotten to check in with himself. He had forgotten to ask whether he was truly happy or whether he was just doing what was expected of him. He had been so busy trying to prove something to others that he had neglected the one person who mattered the most, himself. Maybe I need to slow down," Jason said quietly, almost as if he was still convincing himself. "I've been so focused on doing everything right that I forgot what it feels like to just live." Malik smiled. "That's the first step, man. It's not about perfection. It's about balance. And finding what makes you happy, not just what makes everyone else happy." Later that evening, Jason sat on his bed, his mind still buzzing with the conversation he had with Malik. He had a lot of work to do, but for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel an overwhelming sense of panic. Maybe it was because he had made a decision. Maybe it was because, in that moment, he finally understood that he didn't have to be perfect to be worthy of love, success, or happiness. Jason pulled out his phone and sent a quick message to his mom. Jason, hey, Mom. Just wanted to let you know I'm doing well. Thanks for always believing in me. I'm learning to take things one step at a time. He didn't expect an immediate reply, but within minutes, his phone buzzed with a message back. Mom, I'm proud of you, Jason. Just remember, it's okay to take a break sometimes. You've got this. Jason smiled, feeling a sense of warmth spread through him. His mom didn't need to understand every detail of his struggle, she just needed to know he was okay. And for the first time in a while, Jason believed that he was. The next day, Jason decided to take Malik's advice to heart. He went for a walk around campus, letting the fresh air clear his mind. He didn't have a particular destination in mind, he just wanted to breathe and to remind himself that there was more to life than grades and achievements. As he walked, he noticed the little things, the way the sunlight streamed through the trees, the sound of laughter coming from a group of students sitting on the lawn, the feeling of the grass beneath his feet. He realized that, for the first time in a long while, he was present. He wasn't rushing to the next deadline or trying to impress anyone. He was just being. And for that moment, that was enough. The following weeks were both easier and harder than Jason expected. He'd started to take Malik's advice seriously. He was still working hard, after all, his scholarship depended on his performance, but now, he was trying to find moments of balance. He began to make time for friends, for himself, and even for those quiet walks on campus. Life felt a little lighter. But the weight of his family's expectations still pressed down on him. The phone call came one Thursday evening. Jason, when are you coming home? His mother's voice crackled through the phone. She sounded upbeat, but there was something in her tone that made him pause. I'm doing well, Mom. School's been busy, but I'm keeping up, Jason replied, pushing down the tension in his chest. He could already feel the familiar knot tightening as the conversation veered toward expectations. Good, good, she said quickly. But we really need to talk about your future. Your father and I have been talking. It's time to focus on the next steps after you graduate. We were thinking maybe you could start looking at companies in the city. I've heard good things about a few tech firms. Jason's heart sank. The conversation was one he had dreaded for years. Mom, I'm not sure I want to go into tech right away. I've been thinking about other options. I want to make a real difference, you know. Maybe nonprofit work. Something meaningful. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Nonprofit work, his mom repeated, the skepticism clear in her voice. Jason, I just want you to be successful. You've worked so hard to get to this point. I want to see you secure a job where you can be comfortable. Where you don't have to worry about money all the time. Jason bit his lip, feeling his frustration build. He understood his mom's concern. She had worked tirelessly to give him opportunities. She didn't want him to struggle like she had. But in those words, he heard the same pressure he'd felt his whole life, the pressure to do what was expected, not necessarily what he wanted. I get it, Mom. I do. But I have my own ideas of what success looks like. His voice was firmer now, though still laced with uncertainty. It's not just about the paycheck for me. It's about finding something that matters, something that makes a real difference. His mother sighed. I just don't want you to throw away your future. This scholarship, this opportunity, Jason, you've worked too hard for this. Jason stayed silent for a moment, staring out the window. The lights of the city stretched out before him, each building representing a choice, a path he could take. The weight of his mom's words hung in the air, but so did his own dreams. He knew he had to find a way to balance them both, his mother's love and her expectations, and his own desire to forge a path that was true to who he was. "I'll think about it, Mom," he finally said, his voice softer. "But I need some time to figure it out. I promise." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and Jason could almost hear the weight of his mother's thoughts. Finally, she spoke again, her voice much quieter. "Just, don't rush into anything. And don't forget, you've got a family who loves you." Jason closed his eyes, fighting the lump in his throat. "I know, Mom. I know." After the call, Jason was left alone with his thoughts. He had told his mom what she wanted to hear, but he knew deep down that the struggle wasn't over. His future had always felt like something he could shape. But now, with his scholarship in hand and his mom's hopes resting on him, the pressure felt even more overwhelming. The next few days, he found himself retreating into his studies, trying to drown out the conflicting thoughts swirling in his mind. But no matter how hard he worked, it didn't feel like he was getting any closer to the answers he needed. Malik, as always, was there to help ground him. "Yo, you okay?" Malik asked one evening, finding Jason alone in the campus library, surrounded by textbooks and papers. Jason hadn't even realized he'd been staring at the same page for an hour. "Yeah," Jason replied absently. "Just, thinking." "About what?" Malik asked, taking a seat across from him. Jason hesitated before replying. "About everything. My future, my mom, what she wants for me. What I want for myself." Malik raised an eyebrow, sensing the weight of the conversation. "That sounds heavy." "It is," Jason admitted. "I want to make a difference, Malik. But I feel like I'm not sure what that looks like anymore. My mom wants me to go into tech, something stable. But I feel like that's not really me." Malik leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "You know, you've got to live for yourself. I get that your mom wants the best for you, but you've got to figure out what makes you happy. No one else can do that for you." Jason nodded, but the doubt lingered. "It's just hard. I don't want to disappoint her, but I also don't want to just do something because it's what she expects." Malik let out a low whistle. "That's a tough spot to be in, man. But you're smart enough to figure this out. You've been doing it all along. Don't let anyone dictate your future, especially not out of fear." Jason stared at Malik for a long moment, the truth of his words settling in. "Yeah," Jason said finally, his voice steadier than before. "I think I needed to hear that." Malik smiled, giving him a playful nudge. "That's what I'm here for. Just don't forget, this is your life. Live it the way you want to." As Jason walked back to his dorm that night, the weight of his conversation with Malik lingered. The path forward didn't seem any clearer, but for the first time, he felt like he had the strength to carve it out for himself. He didn't have to choose between his dreams and his family's expectations, he could find a way to honor both. It was going to be hard. He knew that. But he also knew that he wasn't alone in this. He had his friends, his professors, and a newfound sense of clarity that he hadn't had before. And no matter what, he would find his way. The weeks that followed felt like a blur to Jason. His newfound clarity was slowly being tested by the mounting pressures of school and the heavy weight of his family's expectations. No matter how much he tried to balance everything, it felt like he was falling short in some way. It was midterm season, and Jason was juggling assignments, projects, and studying for exams. He tried to keep everything together, making time for his friends and even indulging in his occasional walks, but the stress was starting to wear on him. He had less time to unwind, fewer moments to relax. Every waking moment felt like it was dedicated to something else: studies, future plans, and the ever-present voice of his mother in his mind, urging him to live up to the dream she had for him. But more than anything, Jason found himself wondering if his own dream was enough. One evening, after a particularly grueling study session, Jason collapsed into his dorm bed, exhausted. His mind raced as he stared up at the ceiling, replaying everything that had happened in the past few weeks. The scholarship, the pressure, the constant feeling that he was never quite doing enough. And now, the thought of what he was supposed to do after graduation loomed over him like an impending storm. For a long time, Jason had been running on the assumption that he would figure everything out eventually. But now, it was becoming clear that eventually was slipping further away, and he didn't know what to do next. The idea of making his mom proud was constantly in the back of his mind. She had sacrificed so much to get him to this point. She had given him opportunities that she never had. But every time he thought about what he really wanted, something that was meaningful and fulfilling to him, he felt like he was betraying her. It wasn't long before Jason started losing sleep, his mind endlessly spinning in circles, unable to quiet his thoughts. His grades, once impeccable, began to slip as he found himself stretched too thin. The stress became physical. His appetite waned, and he began feeling a heaviness in his chest that never seemed to lift. Something was wrong. He could feel it deep within him. One morning, he stood in front of the mirror in his dorm bathroom, staring at his reflection. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, and his face looked thinner than it should have been. He didn't recognize the person looking back at him. It was as if all the pressure had stripped him of who he really was. His hands shook as he ran them through his hair, and a deep sense of fear settled in his chest. He had to make a decision. Something had to change. Jason couldn't keep going on like this. He couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when he was falling apart on the inside. The next day, Jason decided to skip his morning classes. He wasn't sure if it was a wise choice, but at that moment, he couldn't bring himself to sit in another lecture. Instead, he wandered around campus, seeking the solace of the empty pathways and quiet corners that had once brought him peace. He found his way to the park on the edge of campus. It was early in the day, and the weather was unseasonably warm for early spring. He sat down on a bench under a large oak tree, the quiet sound of birds chirping and the occasional hum of traffic in the distance. It felt like the calm before a storm. Jason closed his eyes and tried to take deep breaths, willing himself to relax, to let go of the pressure. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to just be, no expectations, no responsibilities, no deadlines. He needed a moment to feel human again. As he sat there, his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a message from Malik. "Malik, hey man, you good? Haven't seen you around much lately. Let me know if you need to talk." Jason stared at the message for a long moment. The words were simple, but they hit him harder than he expected. Malik had been one of the few constants in his life, someone who never judged him and always seemed to know when something was wrong. He thought about calling him, but instead, he sent a reply. "Jason, I'm not sure, Malik. Everything feels like too much right now. I just need to figure things out." The phone buzzed again within seconds. "Malik, I get it, bro. I'm here if you need me. But remember, you don't have to have everything figured out today. Take it one step at a time. Don't carry it all alone." Jason put the phone down, the weight of Malik's words settling in. He had been carrying everything alone for so long, trying to meet everyone's expectations and his own. But the truth was, he didn't have all the answers. He couldn't solve everything in one day, and maybe it wasn't fair to expect that of himself. As he sat there, the warm breeze ruffling his hair, he realized something important: he didn't have to have everything figured out. It was okay not to know exactly what came next. What mattered was taking a step forward, even if that step was small. Later that afternoon, Jason met Malik at their usual spot in the campus cafe. Malik was already sitting at a table, his usual easy grin plastered on his face. But when he saw Jason, his expression softened, and he immediately stood up. "You good?" Malik asked, his voice low, as if sensing Jason's exhaustion before he even spoke. Jason sat down, rubbing his face in frustration. "I don't know, man. I've been trying to keep it all together, but I'm just not. Everything feels like too much." Malik nodded, his gaze serious. I get it. But listen, you don't have to have it all figured out today. I know that's hard to hear, but you need to give yourself some grace. You've been running on empty for a while now. Jason's eyes filled with frustration. It's not just about being tired. It's about feeling like I'm letting everyone down. My mom, my teachers, even myself. I thought I could handle it, but I don't think I can anymore. Malik leaned forward, his voice soft but firm. Jason, you're only human. No one expects you to have it all figured out. Your mom just wants to see you happy, man. She doesn't want you to lose yourself in trying to be everything to everyone else. You don't have to do it all alone. Jason felt a tear slip down his cheek before he could stop it. It had been so long since he had allowed himself to feel anything other than pressure or stress. But as the weight of the conversation hit him, he finally let go of some of it. I don't know how to stop, Jason admitted, his voice thick with emotion. You don't have to stop forever, Malik said. But sometimes, you need to take a step back, breathe, and just live. You're not failing, Jason. You're just figuring it out. Jason sat in silence, the words sinking in. For the first time in a long while, he felt a glimmer of hope. The days that followed Jason's conversation with Malik were different. It wasn't that the pressure had magically disappeared or that everything was suddenly clear. But something inside him had shifted. For the first time in a long time, Jason allowed himself to take a breath, to focus on what really mattered to him. He started small. Instead of pulling all-nighters, he scheduled more breaks. Instead of running through assignments just to get them done, he tried to engage with the material, not just for the grades, but for the knowledge. The change was subtle, but it made a difference. Jason also began reaching out more to his friends. He called Darnell one evening after a particularly grueling day, just to talk. They'd always had a quiet, supportive friendship, and it felt good to hear a familiar voice. Man, you doing okay? Darnell asked when Jason picked up the phone. I'm getting there, Jason replied, leaning back in his dorm chair. I'm not sure how, but I'm starting to figure it out. Finally. Good to hear, Darnell said with a chuckle. You know, I was worried you were gonna burn out before we even made it to graduation. Jason smiled at that. I was worried about the same thing. But, you know, sometimes you have to slow down to see where you're actually going. They talked for a while about everything and nothing, and Jason realized just how much he'd missed these conversations. He hadn't given himself the space to just be with people without the weight of expectation hanging over him. For the first time in a long time, Jason let go of the worry about the future and simply enjoyed the present. As the weeks passed, Jason began to take better care of himself. He ate healthier meals, tried to sleep more, and took walks around campus, enjoying the peace and quiet that came with the early mornings. He even found a new appreciation for his studies. No longer was he cramming for the sake of grades. Instead, he began to see the bigger picture. He was learning for his own growth, for the things that mattered to him. But despite these changes, there was still one thing that weighed on him, the impending conversation with his mother. He hadn't told her yet about his decision to look beyond a career in tech. It was something he had been avoiding, not because he was scared of her reaction, but because he didn't know how to articulate his feelings. One evening, after he had wrapped up a particularly intense study session, he called her. Hey, Mom, Jason said when she picked up. Jason. How's everything? I haven't heard from you in a few days. I'm good, Mom. Just busy with midterms and all, Jason said, trying to keep the conversation casual. She sighed. I know you're working hard. But I'm starting to worry that you're not making enough time for yourself. You need to take care of your health, too. Jason smiled, feeling a small flicker of warmth in his chest. I'm trying, Mom. I really am. But there's something else I've been thinking about. Something I need to tell you. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. What is it, sweetie? You know you can always talk to me. Jason's heart started pounding in his chest. This was it, the moment he had been avoiding. Mom, I've been thinking a lot about my future lately. And I know you want me to go into tech. But I don't think that's what I want to do. At least not right away. Another pause, longer this time. Jason could practically hear her processing the words. What do you mean, Jason? You've worked so hard for this scholarship. You're so close to graduating. Why change your mind now? I'm not changing my mind, Jason said, trying to keep his voice steady. I think I want to do something different. Something that feels more connected to what I care about. I want to explore options in nonprofit work, in helping people directly. There was silence for a long moment, and Jason's chest tightened. He had braced himself for an argument, for the disappointment in his mother's voice. But instead, she spoke softly, her voice full of concern. Jason, I just want you to be secure. I don't want you to struggle like I did. Tech is a safe option. It's a steady job that pays well. I just don't want you to get hurt. Jason's throat tightened, and he took a deep breath. I understand, Mom. I really do. But I've been thinking about what I want. I want to find a way to make a difference, to help people. That's the kind of work I've been thinking about. And I know it might not have the security of a tech job, but I believe it will make me happy. After another long silence, his mom finally spoke again. I can't say I understand completely, Jason. But I do hear you. And I know you're trying to do what's right for you. I'll support you, no matter what. Just, promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you won't take unnecessary risks. Jason smiled, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. I promise, Mom. I'm going to figure it out. I just need to take things one step at a time. All right, she said, a slight chuckle in her voice. You've always been stubborn, but I guess that's what makes you you. Jason laughed softly, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. Thanks, Mom. I love you. I love you too, Jason. Don't forget that. As the call ended, Jason felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt in weeks. He had done it, he had taken the first step toward being true to himself. It hadn't been easy, and he wasn't sure what the future held. But he knew one thing for sure, he was no longer bound by the expectations of others. He was free to pursue what mattered most to him. The next morning, Jason woke up early, feeling strangely optimistic. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was moving in the right direction, not toward a future defined by others, but toward one he could shape for himself. As he walked to class, he looked around at the campus, seeing it through different eyes. It wasn't just a place of deadlines and pressure. It was a place of opportunity. And whatever came next, Jason knew he was ready to face it. The weeks after Jason's conversation with his mother were a whirlwind of mixed emotions. On one hand, he felt lighter, unburdened by the constant weight of expectation that had hung over him for so long. On the other hand, the uncertainty of his future loomed larger than ever. As he walked through the campus, the once familiar paths seemed to stretch out before him, filled with endless possibilities. But with those possibilities came questions that didn't have easy answers. His decision to shift his focus from tech to nonprofit work was met with support from some friends and confusion from others. Darnell, for example, had been nothing but encouraging. He understood that Jason was seeking a deeper sense of fulfillment, something that resonated with his values and passions. But for others, like Malik, the change seemed more difficult to understand. Man, are you sure about this? Malik asked one afternoon, as they sat in the quiet corner of their favorite campus cafe. I mean, nonprofit work. You know the kind of money you can make in tech, right? You could change your life with a good job there. Jason looked at his friend, his mind racing. It was a question that had gnawed at him since the conversation with his mom. He had asked himself the same thing, over and over. But his answer felt more solid now, clearer than it had ever been. "I get what you're saying, Malik," Jason replied, his voice steady. "But it's not just about the money. It's about what I want to do with my life. I've been following this track for so long, just doing what others thought was best for me. I need to make a change. I need to find work that means something to me." Malik took a sip of his coffee, clearly processing Jason's words. "I hear you. I just want to make sure you're not jumping into something without thinking it through. But if you're really passionate about it, then I'm with you. Just, don't let the struggle wear you down, man. I know you. You're hard on yourself." Jason smiled, feeling the warmth of Malik's words. "Thanks, man. I really appreciate that." As spring turned into summer, Jason felt himself growing more and more at peace with his decision. His classes were wrapping up, and with finals approaching, he threw himself into his work with renewed focus. He wasn't just studying for grades anymore. He was studying for something greater, his future, his purpose. And with every page he read, every exam he aced, he felt more certain that he was on the right path. One afternoon, after finishing a particularly challenging final, Jason walked out of the lecture hall and into the bright summer sunlight. He squinted against the light and took a deep breath, relishing the warmth of the sun on his skin. It felt like a moment of liberation. For the first time in what felt like forever, he didn't feel rushed. He didn't feel like he had to meet some impossible standard. He had done his best. He had worked hard. And now, for the first time, he allowed himself to feel proud of that. But the peace he felt was fleeting. The reality of life after graduation loomed, and as the days passed, Jason found himself becoming increasingly anxious about what came next. He had made a decision, but now he had to figure out how to make it work. Non-profit organizations, while fulfilling, weren't as secure as the tech industry. The jobs he was looking at didn't promise the kind of stability his mom had hoped for, and deep down, Jason wondered if he had made a mistake. Late one night, as he sat at his desk in his dorm room, scrolling through non-profit job listings on his laptop, he received a message from his mother. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about what you said. I want you to be happy, Jason. I really do. But I still want you to be careful. If you ever need help finding a job, you know I can help with that. Just promise me you won't struggle unnecessarily." Jason read the message several times, his heart heavy. His mother's words were filled with love, but they also carried a reminder of the burden she had placed on him. The weight of her hopes for him still pressed down on his shoulders, even from miles away. He couldn't escape it, not entirely. He sighed and closed the laptop, pushing it aside. Maybe tomorrow would bring more clarity. Maybe he could figure things out then. But for tonight, he needed to let it go. He leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling, his mind filled with uncertainty. And then, as if on cue, his phone buzzed with a new message. "Malik, hey, what's up? You seem kind of distant lately." Jason stared at the text for a moment. How could he explain everything he was feeling? How could he put into words the conflict inside him, the tug between his dreams and his reality, between his desire for purpose and his need for stability? He hesitated before replying. "Jason, I'm just figuring things out. I don't know what comes next, man. It's like I made this decision, but now I'm not sure if I made the right one." There was a pause before Malik's reply came. "Malik, bro, I get it. You're trying to figure out what feels right for you. But listen, there's no right or wrong here. You're doing what you feel is best, and that's all you can do. Don't let the pressure get to you. If you want this non-profit thing, you'll make it work. Just take it one step at a time." Jason smiled at the screen, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. Malik always had a way of putting things into perspective, making him feel like he wasn't alone in this. And maybe that was the truth, he wasn't alone. Not really. He had people in his life who cared about him, who wanted to see him succeed. And that mattered more than anything else. The next morning, Jason decided to take a break from his worries. He grabbed his bag, headed out the door, and made his way to the park once more. The sky was clear, the sun bright and warm on his skin. As he walked through the peaceful campus grounds, he reflected on how far he had come, on the journey that had led him here. The future was uncertain. There were no guarantees, no promises of an easy path ahead. But that didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that Jason was no longer trying to live someone else's dream. He was building his own, one step at a time. And with every step, he was getting closer to finding the peace and purpose he had been searching for all along. Jason's phone buzzed late one afternoon as he sat in the campus library, his textbook spread out in front of him. He glanced at the screen to see an unfamiliar number. He hesitated for a second before answering. "Hello?" he said, his voice a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "Hi, is this Jason Porter?" a woman's voice asked, smooth but professional. "Yeah, this is him," Jason replied, sitting up straighter in his chair. "Jason, this is Emily Harris. I'm the Director of Outreach at Bright Horizons, a nonprofit organization that focuses on community development and youth empowerment. We've been following your work and would love to discuss an opportunity with you." Jason blinked, his heart rate picking up. Bright Horizons. He had heard of them, one of the most respected nonprofit organizations in the country, focused on education, mentorship, and community outreach. They had partnerships with schools across the country and were known for providing transformative programs for underserved youth. This was the kind of organization Jason had dreamed of working with. "Of course," he said, his voice suddenly much more alert. "I'd love to hear more." "Great. We're actually in the middle of recruiting new members for our mentorship program. After reviewing your resume and some of your volunteer work, we believe you'd be a strong fit for our team. I'd like to set up an interview for next week, if that works for you." Jason could hardly contain his excitement. He had spent so many hours working on his resume, volunteering wherever he could, and researching potential organizations. It was a lot of hard work for something that felt like it could be a long shot. But now, it was paying off. "That sounds amazing," Jason said, trying to keep his cool. "I'm definitely interested. What time works best for you?" The days leading up to the interview were a blur of anticipation and preparation. Jason spent hours researching Bright Horizons, reading through their website and past projects, making sure he understood their mission and values. He knew this was his chance to prove himself, to show them that his passion for helping others wasn't just something he talked about, it was something he lived. The morning of the interview, Jason felt both nervous and ready. He put on a crisp button-up shirt and his best pair of jeans, even though the nonprofit world was known for being more laid back. His hands were clammy as he made his way to the campus building where the video interview would take place. But his nerves were mixed with something else, hope. This could be the opportunity that set everything in motion. The interview began with the usual pleasantries. Emily Harris introduced herself and spoke briefly about Bright Horizons and its mission. Jason nodded along, already familiar with much of what she said, but he listened intently anyway, his heart racing. Then, Emily began asking questions. "Jason, I see that you've worked with several community organizations during your time in college. What inspired you to get involved in that work?" she asked, her tone friendly but focused. Jason leaned forward slightly, his confidence growing as he spoke. "When I was younger, I always felt that there was a disconnect between the resources available to students in wealthier areas and those in underserved communities. I realized that if I wanted to make a difference, I had to be part of that solution. I started volunteering in high school, and then in college, I worked with organizations that provided mentorship and academic support. It's about creating opportunities, you know. Every student deserves a shot at success, regardless of where they come from." Emily seemed to appreciate Jason's response, nodding as she typed some notes into her laptop. "That's a great mindset to have, Jason. It's clear you're passionate about youth empowerment. Can you tell me about a time when you faced a challenge while working on a project, and how you overcame it? Jason thought for a moment. There had been many challenges, but there was one that stood out. I was part of a team that organized a back-to-school event for middle school students in a neighborhood that had recently gone through a lot of hardship. Many of the families were struggling financially, and we didn't have much of a budget. We had to get creative. I worked with the team to secure donations from local businesses, set up partnerships with other organizations, and even coordinated volunteers to make sure we had enough hands on deck. It wasn't easy, but seeing the kids' faces when they received school supplies, seeing how excited they were about the year ahead, it made everything worth it. There was a brief silence as Emily considered his answer. Then, she smiled, clearly impressed. That's exactly the kind of initiative we're looking for at Bright Horizons, Jason. Your ability to think outside the box and stay focused on the bigger picture is exactly what we need. I think you'd be a great fit for our team. Jason felt a rush of relief and excitement. He had done it. He had impressed her. But he tried to keep his emotions in check, not wanting to appear too eager. Thank you, Emily. That means a lot to me. Emily smiled again. We'll be in touch soon, Jason. In the meantime, is there anything else you'd like to ask me about the position? Jason thought for a moment, then asked a question that had been on his mind for a while. How does Bright Horizons measure the success of its mentorship programs? What impact do you hope to see in the communities you serve? Emily answered thoughtfully. We focus on long-term outcomes, not just immediate results. Success for us is about seeing growth in the students we mentor, growth in their academic achievements, but also in their personal development. We want to see them feel empowered, like they have the tools to succeed in school and in life. Ultimately, it's about giving them the confidence and skills they need to create opportunities for themselves. Jason nodded, feeling a sense of alignment with her words. This was exactly what he wanted to be a part of, this type of impact, this kind of change. It was why he had made the decision to leave the tech world behind and pursue something more meaningful. Well, I think that's all the questions I have, Jason said, smiling as the interview came to a close. Thank you so much for your time today, Emily. Thank you, Jason. We'll be in touch soon, Emily said, her voice warm and genuine. As Jason clicked off the video call and leaned back in his chair, he allowed himself a moment to breathe. His heart was still racing, but now there was a sense of accomplishment. He had given his best, and that was all he could do. Now, all he could do was wait. The days following Jason's interview with Bright Horizons seemed to stretch on endlessly. Each time he checked his phone, he was met with the same disappointing silence. No new messages. No calls. No email notifications. His thoughts were filled with the constant cycle of what-ifs, his mind unwilling to settle into the peace he had hoped would come after such a promising conversation. He was doing his best to keep busy, filling his days with finals preparation, community service, and hanging out with Malik and Darnell. But beneath the surface, a quiet anxiety simmered, eating away at his patience. "What's up with you today, man?" Malik asked one afternoon as they grabbed lunch in the campus dining hall. "You've been acting like you've got a storm cloud over your head." Jason pushed his food around his plate, trying to hide his unease. "I'm just waiting for a response. I had that interview with Bright Horizons a few days ago, and I haven't heard back yet." Malik raised an eyebrow. "It's only been a few days, dude. You've gotta relax. They probably just have a lot going on." Jason nodded but didn't feel reassured. It wasn't just that the wait was killing him, it was the uncertainty. He couldn't help but wonder whether the interview had gone as well as he thought. Was there something he missed? Something he hadn't said? Maybe they'd already filled the position. Or maybe, just maybe, they didn't think he was the right fit after all. I know, Jason said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "I just can't help but think about it, you know. It's like my future is hanging on this one decision." You'll be fine, Malik said with a shrug. You're smart, you're capable, and you're doing the right thing by following what makes you happy. The right job is gonna come along. Just be patient. Jason appreciated his friend's optimism, but it didn't quite settle his nerves. It was harder than he expected to trust that everything would work out, especially when it felt like the clock was ticking down to some unknown deadline. His mind kept racing. What would he do if Bright Horizons didn't come through? What if he had made the wrong decision? As the weekend approached, Jason decided to get away from campus for a bit. He'd been so wrapped up in his thoughts and schoolwork that he hadn't taken any time to just breathe. He called his mom and asked if she wanted to spend some time together, away from the hustle and bustle of his studies. She agreed immediately, and the two of them planned to meet up at a park just outside of the city. When Jason arrived, his mom was already there, sitting on a bench and enjoying the sunshine. Her face lit up when she saw him, and for a moment, it felt like nothing had changed. It was just him and his mom, spending time like they always had. "How are you, baby?" she asked, pulling him into a hug. "You look like you've been carrying the world on your shoulders." Jason smiled, hugging her back. "Yeah, a little bit. It's been a crazy few weeks, but I'm getting through it." They sat down together, and his mom handed him a cup of iced tea she had brought. The breeze rustled the leaves in the trees, and Jason felt the tension in his shoulders ease just a little bit. Maybe this was exactly what he needed, time with his mom, time away from the pressure of exams and job searching. They spent the afternoon talking about everything and nothing. Jason told her about his classes, his friends, and the little victories he'd had recently. His mom listened with the same warmth and encouragement she always had. But there was one thing that weighed heavily on Jason's mind, and he knew it was time to talk about it. "Mom," Jason said, his voice quieter now. "I know you want what's best for me, and I appreciate that more than anything. But I'm starting to wonder if I'm really doing the right thing. I've been so focused on what you and everyone else expect from me, tech jobs, financial stability, a predictable future. But now that I've been looking at nonprofits, I'm not sure anymore. What if I'm just chasing something that's not realistic? What if I end up failing?" His mom watched him carefully, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then, she took a deep breath and placed a hand on his arm. "Jason, I want you to know that I only want what's best for you. But I also want you to be true to yourself. I know you've spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I see how much it means to you. I may not always understand everything, but I trust you to make the right choices for your own future. And if this nonprofit work is what makes you feel fulfilled, then I'll support you." Jason's eyes filled with gratitude as he looked at his mom. "Thanks, Mom. I don't know. It's hard to imagine a future where I'm doing something so different, you know." His mom smiled gently. "I know. It's scary to step into the unknown, but remember, you've always been brave enough to take risks. Even when you were a kid, you never hesitated to dive into something new. You'll figure it out, Jason. I believe in you." The words settled deep into Jason's heart, offering him a sense of calm he hadn't felt in days. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to believe that everything would be okay. Maybe the path he had chosen wasn't easy, and maybe it wouldn't always be smooth, but it was his path, and he was ready to walk it. By the time Jason returned to campus, he felt lighter. The conversation with his mom had cleared some of the fog in his mind, but the waiting still remained. He tried not to obsess over his phone as much as he had been, but it wasn't easy. Every time his phone buzzed, his heart jumped. Then, one Thursday afternoon, it happened. Jason's phone rang, and the name on the screen made his stomach flip. Emily Harris. He took a deep breath and answered. "Hello." "Hi, Jason. It's Emily from Bright Horizons," Emily said. "I wanted to thank you again for your interview last week. We were really impressed with your passion and experience, and after discussing your application with the team, I'm excited to offer you a position as a youth mentor with our organization." Jason's mind raced as the words sunk in. He had done it. He had gotten the job. "Thank you," he said, his voice shaking with excitement. "This means so much to me. I'm so grateful for this opportunity." Emily's voice was warm and encouraging. "We're excited to have you join us, Jason. We believe you'll be a great addition to the team." As Jason hung up the phone, he felt like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The future was still uncertain, but now he had a direction. He had a purpose. The weeks following Jason's acceptance into Bright Horizons were a whirlwind. As the semester came to a close, he found himself juggling his final exams, the emotional weight of saying goodbye to the college chapter of his life, and the excitement of starting his new role. It felt like his entire world was shifting, all at once, but this time, it was a shift he welcomed. The day he finished his last exam, Jason felt a sense of relief wash over him. The pressure of finals was finally over. But as he packed up his dorm room, another wave of realization hit him: college was ending. This wasn't just a chapter turning, it was the beginning of something entirely new. He was moving on to a career, to a future he had spent years working toward. And he couldn't help but think of how far he'd come, from a kid in a struggling neighborhood to someone who had the opportunity to make a real difference. "Darnell, Malik, I think it's time," Jason said as he stood in front of his now empty dorm room, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Malik grinned and slapped him on the back. "You know, it's not just time, right? It's the next step. You've been talking about this for years, and now you're finally gonna do it. I'm proud of you, man." Darnell, who was sitting on the bed with a serious expression, nodded. "You've earned it, Jay. I'm just glad I got to watch you grow through all this. We've been through a lot, but you're finally living your dream. Don't forget to come back and show us how it's done." Jason felt a lump in his throat, and he struggled to find the right words. "Thanks, guys. For real. It's not just me getting there. We all made it this far together." Malik nodded, throwing his arm around Jason's shoulders. "Yeah, man. But when you're running the non-profit empire, don't forget us little people." Jason chuckled, the bond of friendship stronger than ever. He had always known that no matter where life took him, these guys would be there for him. College was ending, but their friendship was built to last. A week later, Jason found himself sitting in a small office at the Bright Horizons headquarters. He had moved to a new city for the job, feeling both excited and anxious about the transition. His apartment was modest but cozy, and he'd already started to explore the area. Still, there was a nervous energy in the air as he waited for his first official meeting with the team. "Jason, welcome aboard," Emily Harris said as she walked into the room, offering him a firm handshake. "I'm glad you're here." "Thanks for having me," Jason replied, his voice steady but filled with anticipation. "I'm excited to get started." Emily smiled and sat down across from him. "We're thrilled to have you on board. The mentorship program is one of our flagship initiatives, and I think you're going to be a great addition to the team. We're just about to kick off a new round of sessions, and we've matched you with a group of high school juniors. They're bright, but many of them come from backgrounds that have made it difficult to succeed academically. It's a big challenge, but I have no doubt you'll rise to it." Jason nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. "I'm ready for the challenge. I know it's not going to be easy, but I want to make a difference. I believe in what this organization stands for." "Good to hear," Emily said with a nod. "Your first session will be next week. We'll be doing a series of group activities, and we'll focus on building trust with the students. They need to know they can count on you before anything else. After that, we'll start digging into their academic needs." Jason couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and nerves at the prospect. These kids, he would be responsible for helping them find their way, to give them hope when they felt like there was none. It was everything he had dreamed of. The first day on the job was both exhilarating and exhausting. Jason sat in on a meeting with other mentors, where they discussed their individual approaches and shared tips on how to connect with the students. He listened intently, taking mental notes on how to make the most of the opportunity. Then, it was time for him to meet the students he would be working with. The group of juniors was diverse, different backgrounds, different experiences, but all of them shared a common thread: they were at a crossroads in their lives. Some were struggling academically, some emotionally, and some were simply trying to figure out what came next after high school. Jason's heart went out to them immediately. He could see in their eyes the uncertainty, the doubt, and the fear of not knowing what the future held. But he also saw potential, so much potential. "Hey, everyone," Jason said as he walked into the room, trying to sound confident despite the butterflies in his stomach. "My name's Jason. I'm here to help you figure out where you want to go, and how you're going to get there. Whether that's school, work, or something else entirely, I'm here to support you." The students looked at him warily, unsure of what to expect. Jason understood that, he had been in their shoes. But he was determined to break through their walls and show them that they could trust him. Over the next few weeks, Jason worked tirelessly with his group, using every tool and skill he had learned throughout his life to help these kids see their own worth. They had all faced hardships, some personal, some financial, some educational, but Jason knew that their stories weren't over yet. He pushed them to do their best, to dig deep into themselves and find their strength. It wasn't easy. There were moments when the students didn't want to open up, when they resisted the support he offered. But Jason didn't back down. He kept showing up, every day, ready to guide them, ready to listen, and ready to challenge them to do better. And slowly, something changed. The students began to trust him. They started opening up, sharing their fears and dreams, and for the first time in a long time, they started to believe that they could achieve something greater than they ever thought possible. Jason's journey had just begun. It wasn't going to be easy, but he was ready for it. He had chosen this path for a reason. He was here to make a difference, one life at a time. And with every breakthrough, every smile, every moment of progress, he knew he was exactly where he needed to be. It had been 6 months since Jason started working at Bright Horizons. The time had flown by faster than he could have ever imagined, and yet, every day felt like a new challenge, a new victory, a new lesson learned. In those 6 months, he had transformed not just in his career but in his understanding of what it meant to truly make a difference. He had built strong relationships with the students he mentored. Some were still struggling to see their worth, others were slowly but surely discovering their potential. But it wasn't just about the work anymore. It was about the lives he was helping to shape, about being there for these young people who needed someone to believe in them. He thought about his first day, nervous, unsure, and full of expectations. He never could have predicted how fulfilling this would be. His doubts had been real back then, but they were far behind him now. In their place was a sense of purpose and satisfaction that had eluded him for so long. This was his calling. This was where he was meant to be. One Tuesday afternoon, Jason found himself walking into the mentorship office, his usual routine disrupted by a message from Emily. She had asked him to come in for a quick meeting. "Hey, Jason," Emily greeted him warmly as he entered the small meeting room. She motioned for him to sit down. "I have some exciting news." Jason raised an eyebrow. "Exciting news? What's up?" Emily smiled, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Well, I've been keeping an eye on your progress, and I think you're ready for the next step. We've been getting some great feedback from your students and your peers. So, I wanted to offer you a promotion. We'd like you to take on a leadership role in the mentorship program. You'll be overseeing some of the newer mentors, helping them adjust to the team and develop their own strategies. We believe you've got the leadership qualities that can help others grow." Jason was taken aback for a moment. He had always dreamed of helping people, of making a difference, but he hadn't expected this level of responsibility so soon. Still, a sense of pride swelled in his chest. This was a recognition of his hard work, of the change he had helped bring about in these students' lives. I'm honored, Emily, Jason said after a beat. I didn't expect this, but I'd love to help guide others the way I've been guided. Thank you for this opportunity. We're confident in you, Jason, Emily said, her smile warm and genuine. You've shown that you not only care about these kids but that you know how to get results. I think you're going to do great. Jason sat back in his chair, the gravity of what Emily had said sinking in. He had come so far since his first day on the job. He had gone from feeling like an uncertain newcomer to someone trusted with helping others grow. And this was just the beginning. Later that evening, Jason called his mom. He had to share the news with her, the woman who had supported him through every twist and turn of his journey. Mom! Jason exclaimed when she picked up the phone. Guess what? Tell me, baby. What happened? His mom replied, her voice full of curiosity. I got a promotion at work, Jason said, his voice filled with pride. I'm going to be leading some of the other mentors in the program. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and then his mom spoke, her voice thick with emotion. Jason, I'm so proud of you. I knew from the moment you started this journey that you were going to make it. You've worked so hard, and now you're helping others, just like I always hoped you would. Jason's throat tightened, and for a moment, he had to steady himself. It meant the world to him to hear his mom's approval, her belief in him. Thanks, Mom. This is just the beginning, though. I'm still figuring out how to make an even bigger impact, how to help even more people. But this promotion, it feels like I'm moving in the right direction. You are, Jason. You always have been. I'm just so glad you're doing what you love. Jason smiled. I am, too. I really am. The next few weeks were a blur as Jason adjusted to his new role. There was more responsibility now, more students to manage, more mentors to guide. But with each challenge, he felt more confident in his abilities. His leadership skills were developing, and he found new ways to inspire and support the people around him. There were moments when the weight of it all felt overwhelming, but Jason was no longer the unsure young man who had walked into the office 6 months ago. He had grown. He had learned. And most importantly, he had found his place in the world. It wasn't just the students who were thriving. Jason was thriving too. One day, as Jason walked through the halls of Bright Horizons, he paused in front of a bulletin board. A poster had been put up for the nonprofit's annual gala, a fundraising event to support their programs. The poster featured photos of some of the students Jason had worked with. And there, right in the center, was one of his students, a young girl named Aaliyah, who had struggled with self-confidence when she first joined the program. The photo was of her standing proudly in front of a group, beaming with a sense of accomplishment. It was a testament to her journey, to her growth. Jason smiled as he stared at the photo. It was a reminder of why he had taken this job in the first place, to help kids like Aaliyah discover their own strength, their own potential. Jason, Emily said from behind him, snapping him out of his thoughts. You're doing great work. Look at how far Aaliyah has come. You've been a big part of that. Jason turned to Emily, a humble smile on his face. I couldn't have done it alone. It's all of us, working together. She nodded. But you've played a key role. I think that's the mark of a great mentor, when you're not just helping them succeed, but inspiring them to help themselves. Jason felt a warmth spread through him, a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced before. This was what it was all about. This was the change he had been working toward. As he walked out of the office that day, the weight of the world felt a little bit lighter. He had started this journey uncertain of where it would lead, unsure if he was on the right path. But now, looking back, he knew he was exactly where he was supposed to be. And as he stared out at the horizon, he realized that this was just the beginning. The future was wide open, full of possibilities. And Jason was ready for whatever came next. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?